Aloha. Today we're going to be talking about how to ask the right questions to get the right information. As you probably already know, there's a variety of different types of questions that you can ask to get information, but how you ask that question can return information that's really easy to analyze or really specific so you can find out the true details of what people think. So we're going to look at a couple different scenarios today to know what the right type of questions are to ask to get the information you're looking for in the right format for how you can use it to analyze your data. Additionally, I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how to make sure that the surveys you create are appropriate and effective. So let's take a look at a couple of pieces of information I've collected for you. First thing, before we generate our questions, the first thing that we really should do is think about the type of answers that we want. Not like seeding the answers so that people give us the answers that we want to hear, but more along the lines that we hear the things that we think are going to help us when it comes time for us to evaluate our product. We also want to think about the format that we want our answers to be in. Do we want it to be simple and easy to understand, collected for us already, maybe in a pie chart or a bar chart? Or do we want it to be open-ended and we read through people's comments and they're really specific, but it's going to take us longer to analyze? We should always end with the open-ended questions at the very end of our surveys that says, what thoughts or ideas do you have to share? No matter what kind of questions you ask prior to that, you always want to leave people the opportunity to share thoughts that are on their mind that are not necessarily related to any of the specific questions that you asked earlier. This gives people a chance to just share their thoughts and ideas. So, lots of different survey question types that are out there, but they generally fall into three major categories. And you're going to find this throughout your academic career as you try and collect information from people. The first is called the categorical or nominal question types, and you're familiar with most of these. They're simple things like yes, no, multiple choice, or check boxes. There's the ordinal question types like drop down and ranking that deal with the order or putting things in a rank so you can get a sense of how things are related to each other. And then finally, the interval or ratio question types, which include things like ranking scales, matrix, or text boxes. I'll show you these in detail, and we can play around with a couple of them so you can get a sense and idea of how they work. The most common that you're probably familiar with is the categorical or nominal questions. And it's going to sound really crazy when I say this definition. Technically, we would say it's the measurement labeling variables or measurement of labeling variables into distinct classifications or categories. It does not involve quantitative value or order. That's a lot of gobbledygook, right? So let me break it down into plain speak for you. Each choice that you give to your respondent is going to have a name or a value. And what we'll do is we'll count the number of unique responses for each of those names to sort and understand the data. Now, that might still sound confusing, so let me give you a couple of examples. A typical yes-no question might be something like the lines of, are you a sixth grader? Yes or no, right? We're not going to get a ton of detail about how old they are or what grade they might be other than sixth grade, but we'll be able to determine whether or not they're sixth grade or not. Here's an example of what you would consider a multiple choice question. What's your favorite food? Is it pizza, tacos, burgers, fish, chicken, or other? What beverages do you drink would be a checkbox. This is an opportunity to ask and get multiple responses from someone. So if you're looking to collect a bunch of data, but you're not looking for something specific or only one or something, checkboxes are the way to go. Now, we can create all three of these easily in a Google form. So here's a Google form I have. You've seen this one before. We worked on it in class yesterday. I have my categorical nominal questions, which is my named variables here. Remember, each choice has a name or value. Here's the question type. Are you a sixth grader? Yes or no. This is a really simple, easy one to make, a yes-no question. It is still a multiple choice, but we're only giving them one or two options, right? The second type, as we mentioned before, is a multiple choice as well. What is your favorite food, right? And here again, each of these different choices, right, is named out. There's also another. Now, what I could do for this particular type one is you'll notice in Google Forms, I've put in the words other, but I could have chosen instead to create an option, and I love this about Google Forms, to actually add something called other, which people could type their own answers into. So this gives me a lot of flexibility. I think most people are probably going to answer pizza, tacos, or burgers, but who knows? Somebody might say falafels, or somebody might say um, spinach. I don't know. So if somebody has a favorite food other than the ones I've suggested, giving them this open option will return some specific information for me. Okay, and then of course there's the drop down. So this is what the drop down looks like, or I'm sorry, checkboxes. This is what the checkboxes looks like, and it allows for people to be able to choose more than one. Let's go see what this looks like in practice. This is my actual survey, as if somebody were taking it, right? So I go past my sections, and here are my categorical nomical questions, like, are you a sixth grader? I could say yes. In this case, I'm not, right? No, right? I could clear my selection. What's my favorite food? My favorite food happens to be tacos, just so you know. Or if I had something specific, I could type it in here. Maybe my favorite food is actually shawarma. I don't know if I spelled that correctly. Maybe I'll just say, oh, chicken katsu curry. Yeah, I love chicken katsu curry. Oh, with cheese. Anyways, right? And then here's my checkbox, and this gives me an opportunity. Do I drink water? Yes, I do. Do I drink milk? Occasionally. Do I drink juice? Sometimes. Do I drink soda? Yes, I do. Do I drink coffee? Every morning. Do I drink tea? Not really. So I would leave that one blank, right? So again, we're looking at just the named values. Now, what's great about these types of questions, these categorical ones, is that Google Forms will automatically collect all the information and automatically generate a bar graph or a pie chart for us. That makes it really easy for us to see the data collected in one place, so it's easy for us to analyze. Okay, awesome. Now, the next category, as I mentioned, is the ordinal questions. This is order or ranking. And sometimes this is great if we want to get a sense and idea of how important information is to people based in relation to other options. So, for example, when question responses have a clear order, like if you're asking, what is your age? Is it 10? Is it 11? Is it 12? These are our ordinal or order questions, right? Two major types. Drop-down questions can have several different possible answers, but respondents only get to choose one option. And normally when we list out the options, we list them in a specific order. For example, I would list it 10, 11, 12, or I might give a range of things. Are you 1 to 5? Are you 6 to 9? Are you 10 to 13, right? I would create groupings, but again, all in order. This is great, especially for collecting demographic information about people. Yeah. Then the other type of ordinal question you'll see a lot is called ranking questions, and this is great for the respondent to give them the ability to rearrange their choices or really rank in their most preferential to least preferential ideas, the things they like most or they agree or identify with most, right? It's great for finding preferences, right? Least a favorite. So here are a couple of examples. If I'm doing a drop-down question, I might ask, how much screen time do you consume each night? Like 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hours, 4+ hours, right? I order them by putting them in growing order, right? And if I'm doing a ranking question, I might say, what beverages do you prefer most to least? So now I'm taking that same question about what do people drink, but now I'm actually finding out what the preference is. So if I'm going to go through the process of creating an ordinal question and I'm using my drop downs, it's pretty straightforward. Google Forms has a drop down option, and I'm just going to go ahead and seed it with my choice options for my respondent, but I need to make sure I put it in an order that makes logical, and in this case, chronological sense, right? So I start with 0 hours, half an hour, 1 hour, I grow each time. Right? Pretty straightforward. And this will again give me sort of the same type of response as before, either in a pie chart or a bar chart or bar graph. Yeah, there we go. So what about if I want people to rank? Well, there's no default ranking question type in Google Forms. What we can use is the multiple grid choice. So what I would do is I would place all my options in the rows, and in this case, water, milk, juice, soda, coffee, tea. And in my column option, I'm going to give my labeling for where it falls. So in this case, I'm putting first favorite as my first column choice, second, third, fourth, fifth, and yuck being the thing I would feel that people would probably prefer least. So how does that look? Well, again, if I were to go and scroll down and take a look at my ordinal question types, you can see here's what the drop down looks like. How much personal non-school related screen time do you get on average school night? Drop down, right? If I click on that, then people can choose and notice it descends or ascends in order. This is the order, it's ordinal, right? If I'm trying to look at how do I use the matrix feature or the, what is it called? It's called the multiple choice grid. I could use this option to go ahead and give people the option to rank. So they would look at this and say to themselves, wow, my first favorite thing to drink is probably juice. And then I'm going to go with water and then that, that type of thing. For me, it's certainly coffee. Now, this still allows people to go ahead and select multiple, so you might want to give them the instructions to only choose one per column so that you get a real honest ordering. Okay, so I would say coffee is probably the thing I drink. I drink the most. I love it. I probably drink water the second most. It'd probably be juice after that. Probably milk after that. Soda after that, and then I don't drink very much tea. Yeah, so this would be my ranking, and then you would be able to see what on overall is people's most preferential beverage that people need. So that's examples of the ordinal question types, right? Now, the final type, the interval slash ratio questions, is something you're familiar with. You've definitely seen them before. They're really great because you can get some super specific information, right? The most precise data and thorough analysis generally comes from interval ratio questions. So I would always prefer and suggest you default to these choices if you have the option to choose them, right? So what are these and what do they look like? Well, the first option that you're probably familiar with is called the ranking scale questions. And this is when we put the questions on a horizontal, or the answers on a horizontal line, and we use sort of a scale. Here's an example up above. I can go from very unsatisfied to very satisfied, and I've got some stops in between for people to sort of rank or order where they feel most comfortable with their response being. So people who don't really care can give the neutral option in the middle. We just need to make sure that when we're creating these ranking scale options, that we need to make sure that they're balanced so that we've got a really unpopular and a really popular personal option, and that there's generally a middle. So 3 options, fine. 5 options, fine. 7 options, fine. But be careful about 4s because there's really no middle. Be careful about 6 because there's really no middle. So you want to make sure that you're giving people odd choice options. Now, the next option that you'll probably see is the matrix, and that lists a number of questions in a list, but it uses the same scale. So it's just like the ranking scale questions that have the most likely, least likely, but when you have to give lots of questions and you want people to get through the survey quickly, and you're going to use the same type of scale, then you'd use the matrix. I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. And then finally, the question type that is going to be the most open-ended and most specific is just when you give people something called ratio questions. This is where you get direct feedback in the respondent's own words, but it requires a text box. And usually you can do this as like a small text box, which is great for 1, 2, 3, 4 words, or a paragraph text box where people can really put all their different ideas down. Now, this won't create a really simple, easy, automatical, pie chart or bar graph. It'll require you to read through each of the respondents' lines and kind of personally analyze it to see what that information means for you. An open-ended example is the question that we're putting at the end of our surveys, which is what thoughts or ideas do you have for how I can improve my video? So let's take a look at some of these particular examples. So if I go down to my interval ratio questions here, I could say, how satisfied are you with Mr. Carter's attempt to teach students how to make a form by forcing them to fill out a form? Well, if you're very unsatisfied with that, you would choose a 1. If you're very satisfied with that, you would choose a 5. If you really don't care, maybe you're in the middle, there's a 3, right? So this linear scale on a horizontal line with what they identify as most to least or least to most, you need to make sure you identify it. And I'll show you to do that. They don't give you every stop along the way. You can't name every stop. You're going to name your polar opposites. So I generally start with the unhappy, not connected, don't agrees at the lowest number, and the very happy, very satisfied, completely agree at the highest number. Again, you can go in Google Forms up to 10, but be careful about the even numbers. I would always go with odd numbers. That way you give people a balance and you give options for a middle space. Now, you can choose whatever you want as the names for your polar ends, just so you're aware. I chose very unsatisfied and very satisfied, and that gives me the options for people in the middle to be like, oh no, I'm satisfied, or I'm unsatisfied, I'm not that, or just I'm in the middle. Now, here's the example of the matrix option. For example, which Easter candy do you prefer? Right? I want to use the same scale: most satisfying, enjoyable, meh, not interested, yuck. Right? So I'm kind of figuring out how do people feel about a particular item, and I give them a couple of different options of candy. Right? But I want to use that same scale, so a matrix is great for that. And for this case, I'm going to be finding what everybody feels about each individual of these options. I'll find out which are the ones that people really don't like and which are the ones that people do really like. So if I was going to order Easter candy for next year for all of you, I would know which are the ones that I would want to get and which are the ones that I really want to avoid, right? And then again, here is my open-ended ratio question, which is going to get people to give me their detailed thoughts. Now, how does this look? Well, let's go to take a look at that section. Here's my linear scale, 1 to 5, very unsatisfied to very satisfied. What Easter candy do I prefer, right? I can go ahead and say, well, let's see. Marshmallow Peeps, absolutely yuck, too sugary. Can't stand the mushy feel in my mouth. Whoppers, mini robin eggs, actually, those are pretty enjoyable. I like how they melt in my mouth. Starburst jelly beans, ugh, I can't stand that sour stuff. No, thank you. I mean, like, it's not yuck, but I'd pass on it. Cadbury cream egg, every time. Russell Stover milk chocolate Easter bunny, yeah, I enjoy those, but I wouldn't pick it first. Cadbury mini eggs, perfect. I love the flavor of those. I love the crunch. And the Reese's peanut butter eggs, those are great too. I enjoy them. They wouldn't be my first choice if I had an option. Right? So now I'm going to get some great information from people about how they feel on this. And then finally, here's where people are going to have that opportunity to type in their full answer. Now, again, as I mentioned before, I could either choose a short answer, which would be great for a couple of words, or a paragraph, which is where people could type as much as they want in a large box. So those are your general basic question types. Now, that's not the end. There's a couple of things I want you to be aware of. For example, here are some general tips for how you can make sure that your survey works effectively for others. Look for easy to interpret data. So if you can, stick with your multiple choice, stick with your Likert scales, or those ratio scales, so that it's really easy to interpret the information that people give you. You want Google Forms to automatically generate the scales for you, or the pie charts and the bar graphs, because it's going to be really easy for you to understand and analyze. Keep your survey neutral by not asking questions, or not asking leading questions. For example, stay away from asking questions like this. How handsome do you think Mr. Connors is? Right? By putting the word handsome in there, I am already kind of trying to make you think that I am handsome, so my answers are probably going to be a lot more positive, right? Probably I would say, what do you think about Mr. Connor's personal appearance? Now, I'm not actually putting the word handsome inside, so I'm not automatically making you think that I'm handsome, so that's probably a little bit more neutral, right? If I were talking about candy, I'd be like, how absolutely yummy and delicious is the Cadbury cream egg? For some people, just hearing the words absolutely yummy and delicious is going to already shade them in one area. I don't want to force people to give me answers that they don't actually have, so I want to keep my survey neutral. And if you need help with that, let me know. Make sure you keep it balanced with your set of choices. As I mentioned, use the odd numbers like 5, 7 when you're creating your ratio scales. Don't ask for 2 or more things at once. Some of you could ask survey questions like, do you think it was easy to clearly see everything and hear everything that was being said? You're asking 2 separate questions. It's quite possible that your video was really grainy and super dark and people couldn't see, but your microphone was working really well and they could hear you clearly. So they're not going to be able to give you an accurate response. So break that question into two separate questions. Make one of the questions about the ability to clearly see the subject and what they were doing, and have a second question about being able to clearly hear the audio and the dialogue. That way you're not getting cross information that's affecting the quality of the response. Um, Make sure your questions are not too similar, right? So think about, like, you don't want to give people 10 questions all about like the visual quality. That's going to burn people out. So think about what are the most important questions to ask that are going to give you the information that you need about a particular subject or topic. Run with that. Ask no more than 2 questions related to a particular thing. So don't ask more than 2 questions about lighting. Don't ask more than 2 questions about, audio clarity, because you don't want to burn people out. Um, I would also suggest keeping your questions optional. Sometimes people may not be able to respond because either they didn't understand the question, or they didn't see evidence of it in your product, or they don't really have a feeling about it. And if you force them to actually make a choice, you might not get the data that's accurate. So if you go into Google Forms and you take a look when you're editing any of these questions, there's the option always down at the bottom that says require response. So if I turn that on, that means you can't actually move past this question unless you answer it. And they have to answer for every one of these. It's quite possible that somebody has never eaten a Cadbury cream egg. Oh my goodness. Feel, how are you living life right now? Like, how can you even be happy? But anyways, Matt, not interested, yuck. They wouldn't even know how to answer that. Probably I should have added an extra one that would have said, I've never tried it before. Then I could get real accurate data, but still yet, never tried it. But still yet, I should not force people to answer every question. Give them the option to choose to answer the questions they feel comfortable with. And then finally, do a test drive. I can't tell you how many times I've been reading through the questions in my own surveys and found spelling mistakes or errors with the way questions line up, or I left out an answer like I just did with this one. I should have had never tried it. And I wouldn't have thought of that unless I had actually gone through and taken the survey myself. Go through your survey, or have somebody else go through your survey just to look for those little things to help you figure out what kinds of things need to be fixed before the survey goes out to the general population. I can't tell you how many times I've had students send out a survey, and like 2 minutes into it, they're not getting the responses they expected, or people are emailing them and telling them, I can't answer this, or this is broken, or this doesn't work, or you don't have any answers here, or what's this question you didn't add in the text, or why did you keep the 5 default questions inside that aren't related to your video? So make sure you go through the process of previewing it, doing a test drive yourself, have somebody else test drive your survey for you to make sure it works effectively. I really want to throw out a thank you to SurveyMonkey and Zapier.com for sharing with me some of their ideas on how to write good survey questions and effective questions, because it helped me to put this presentation together. I hope that you're going to have a successful time putting together your survey for your video so that you get the right type of information that you need that's going to help you know whether or not your video product is successful. Thanks for hanging in there with me, and I'll see you in class. Aloha.